So you know how this whole console versus console performance thing is brewing. It even brewing to the point where I'm getting, some mentions and some conversations going on and I'm just reading quietly because usually whenever there's a console v console comparison going on, I usually somewhat just smile because these two consoles, the PlayStation 5 and the Series X, are designed by AMD and their architecture is super similar. The difference between them, I'm sure, is so minuscule. And we see it in many games. Whenever, a game comes out, you're going to see like maybe one console has 56 or 54 FPS and then the other one has 60 FPS. And then the, people who are fans or fanboys of one console will go and say, "Yay, see, our console is better than yours in FPS," and so on and so forth. And it's very interesting to see because the differential is not even anything to write home about. Honestly, if somebody owned one or the other in a PC comparative way, they would say, "Oh, okay, well, it seems like both of them are basically performing the same." That's kind of how the thing will go down. However, Digital Foundry has put out some, a metrics video in terms of Doom: The Dark Ages for Series X and the PS5 and PS5 Pro. Now, what this post is, shout out to World of Darkness. He put this clip here where the Digital Foundry person said that the Series X remains king. So I guess the series owners are running with this. They're telling all the PlayStation fans and the PS5 Pro fanboys, "Hey man, our console is doing great," and all this stuff. And it's very interesting. One thing about this is when I say I smile, the reason is because here's what's going on. Digital Foundry is introducing console players to PC level of analysis. So what this would mean now is more and more people will get more acquainted with the entire PC framework and how we look at benchmarks and stuff, so that when I start to make more and more of these videos talking about PC hardware and the comparisons, it's going to be very challenging for anybody to deny having prior knowledge. Hardware Unboxed also did a 36 GPU benchmark in 1080, 1440, and 4K for Doom: The Dark Ages. I know it's berserk. They went ahead and showed everything you can pretty much put your hands on. The RTX 50 series, they went as even low as the 6800. They showed you the 3060, the 3070, 8 gigabytes. They showed you the 7700 XT, the 6800 XT, the 7800 XT, the 6950 XT, the 4070, the 5070. This to me is how we roll. This is like data. I'm just over here going, ooh, yummy, because this is exactly what it is that would help anybody should they want to go ahead and buy a GPU and play this game or upgrade. They know exactly where their performance, is going to reach. Now, this video also in 1440 exposed the 5090, because the 5090 with 32 gigs of VRAM and the 4090 with 24 gigs of VRAM, well, look at the difference, 118 FPS to 125. So this particular differential already tells you that if you have a 4090, you need to go ahead and take that $1,000 extra and donate it to charity if you have nothing else to do with money, or if you just want the latest and the greatest. I mean, it's your money basically, right? Then at 4K with the ultra nightmare settings, the difference between both of them is 82 FPS and 74 FPS. Then when you come all the way down to, say, even the 70, this is the 5070 and the 3080. These guys are doing 37-ish FPS or whatever it is. The 4070 is doing 40 FPS on the ultra settings. I've seen a lot of people try to insinuate that the PlayStation 5 Pro is similar to a 4070. Bruh, this is not the case, because the 4070 is capable of running this game at the ultra nightmare settings, which is pretty much the max that you can get, and is doing this amount in terms of FPS, about 37. They wouldn't even try it for the console, and this is at 4K ultra nightmare TAA settings. Okay, so already I want to go ahead and start kind of positioning this $800 build that I've pretty much kind of modified to the $800 price point. It used to be around a $650, $700 price point. And then I upgraded the CPU, and wabam, we're now at $800 because a YouTuber told one of my audience members that you cannot get PS5 Pro performance for for $800. However, when I'm looking at this chart already, and I look at, say, where this particular GPU of mine that's in this build would land, I'm looking at somewhere lower than the 6800. I know you may not be able to see it here on this chart. It's all the way on the bottom because, that's not really their focus in that regard. But, ladies and gentlemen, if we actually take into account where this is sitting in terms of, the FPS and such, you're going to have to realize that this Doom the Dark Ages game is heavily affected by the ray tracing that ID Soft puts in their, in their games and such. But here's the crazy thing. If you even go ahead and start paying attention to, like, say 1080, because where a game like this is going to shine, especially when you're playing on PC to get the high FPS to be able to do all that stuff, is, more than likely when you're at 1080p. 1080p is going to really, really give you the bang for your buck. And seeing the way 1080 right now is looking, in my opinion, I think it's kind of delicious and such. But we'll do some and run some metrics, though, on this PC, and we'll compare it to, what this so-called $800 PS5 is talking about, because I've seen a lot of people basically take on the PS5 and make it sound like, oh, it's this crazy thing. Another thing that I wanted to go ahead and show you is another video that was done here using the 6700 XT. Now, like I said, this PC uses the 6750 XT. It behaves similar, to the 6700 XT. The difference is not necessarily that much in terms of its marginal aspect, but there is, obviously a clock speed boost. If you did a side-by-side comparison, you'd see that. And in this 6700 XT with 1080p native and low settings, or whatever FSR, they're able to basically come out with 62 FPS, which, if you look at the PS5 version, PS5 Pro and Series X version, you're going to see a similarity in terms of the FPS, counters. These two, hold on, let me mute this. The PS5 Pro is doing about 56 FPS. The Series X is doing locked 60 in some of these areas. Now, you probably see similar drops when it comes down to this. Whenever the thing gets really hot and, there's a lot of VFX on the screen and all of that, you're probably going to see that. And they've gone low settings so that, they can pretty much dodge a lot of the, troubles that would come with ray tracing and such. And so now they're changing it to ultra settings, and the FPS looks more around 68, 70 FPS. And I think there's some FSR modifications going on here. So FSR quality in order basically to be able to use upscaling to do it. Without FSR and native settings, the FPS was still, there was a 5%-ish differential. Doesn't really seem to make too much of a difference. However, one thing that I love about this, the metrics calculator is the frame time. Look at the frame time down here. It's sitting at 16.6 milliseconds or under. This is the beauty of FPS games and the way they program them. They teach every other developer what they need to do. And so you already see at native settings that this thing is already rocking, and doing well at 60 FPS with ultra nightmare settings in this regard. So this is already nice. Then the 6700 XT, which is the younger brother of the 6750 XT, when you go ahead and kick it off to 1440p with FSR balanced, you're going to see that, oh, this is actually doing good. You can get, about 70 FPS depending on where you are. They don't run a 1440 native resolution here. I don't know why. I guess the GPU has already kind of, reached its max limit in a sense. Then they do the 7800 XT, which is interesting because a lot of folk were talking about how you can get the PlayStation 5 Pro compares to the 7800 XT. It doesn't. in many games, it won't. I mean, it's because, the technology is different. However, the 7800 XT is kind of acting weird here at ultra nightmare settings. I don't know exactly what's going on. Sometimes games would do stuff like that because if you look at 6700 XT, its performance with FSR balanced is actually, insane in this regard. So whatever may be going on with the 7800 XT, I couldn't tell you, if you get what I mean. Perhaps it is, maybe closer to what you see, but the frame times are off. So I'm thinking something is, is going on with this particular, setup with this user. But, it just gives you an idea of what it is that you're going to pretty much go ahead and, experience at the end of the day when it comes down to it. FSR quality, let me see what that does. That now raises it to about 70 FPS. This is where, you start seeing some really interesting things. So I'm thinking the different environments that he captured the footage is actually affecting, the variation in terms of performance. But when you look at all these metrics and then you go back and look at the metrics that's here for Doom the Dark Ages between the consoles where they're sitting at 56 to 60 FPS in this particular regard, you already see that there's a very interesting change in terms of things. There's a very, there's a very wild tweak across the board when it comes down to it. And so we'll be able to kind of see exactly what it is these developers have been able to do across the board. And however, I think what will probably be in terms of a better benefit is an NVIDIA card will probably go ahead and, change up the entire thinking, because NVIDIA cards do better with ray tracing. But this is pretty much what I wanted to go ahead and point out in this video. I strongly believe that many times, a lot of people are probably in a position where you're looking at performance and you're wondering how performance goes. Usually on the PC side, when performance is a thing, we just go ahead and find data to kind of show, okay, what is the range of stuff that we're going to see. So from what I've seen here with the 6700 XT, for some strange reason, it seemed to have performed, better than the 6800, than the 7800 XT. But the 7000 series has a weird naming nomenclature as well. For instance, say the 6800 XT is better than the 7800 XT in terms of rasterization performance. It's weird, but I don't know what AMD thought when they were actually going ahead to do something like this. But it is what it is. I just wanted to go ahead and do a preliminary to see how the console, users are taking a very closer look now at the hardware that, is in their console and how it performs, and how AMD external hardware also performs in light of that. Thanks for watching the video. Talk to me in the comment section. Appreciate you all so much, and hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.